Welcome to Geopolitics Demystified. I'm S.L. Canthan. This is our second interview of the podcast series, and we are very pleased to have a fascinating guest, a geopolitical commentator from the beautiful country of Syria and now living in Europe, Kevork Almassian. He has a YouTube channel, Syriana Analysis, where he does live streaming of thoughtful discussions you won't find in mainstream media. We'll talk about the Middle East today. It takes a lifetime to figure out the dynamics of this region, but we'll try to do it in an hour. Welcome, Kevork.
It's a really pleasure to be with you. And if I'm only the second guest, then I feel more honored and humbled to be your second guest on your podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. So last week we had Scott Ritter, and that was a very good interview as well.
Yeah, great mind, Scott.
Yeah. So, well, you are from the Middle East that's in the middle of a catastrophic war and real-time genocide. But now you live in Europe, which is also pushing the boundaries of World War III. What better way to master geopolitics? So my first question is, do you think that these two wars are linked somehow? Like, was this a way for the US to stop or slow down the emerging multipolar world? Like maybe they're thinking, let's destabilize Russia and then do a few regime changes in the Middle East, and then we can take on China.
I feel so lucky that I was born and raised in Syria and lived war, destruction, and conflicts in the region, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Palestine. And then you come to Europe and the European officials decide that now it's time to fight against Russia. You know, now we have to fight them and now we have to send more money and weapons to Ukraine. And unfortunately, this will backfire in Europe. And I live in Europe and I want for Europe to be peaceful and prosperous. But every policy action has a consequence, and this will backfire on Europe negatively, in my opinion. However, if we take one step back, and because your question was, are there any links between these conflicts? I would say definitely. Definitely there are links because the United States is an empire. It's not, for example, a Roman empire or an Islamic empire with clear borders, and it's not. We're not living in the 1940s or let's say the first millennium. This is a different type of empire, and it has different shapes and forms, and it has a different hegemonic tools in order to exert its hegemonic power around the world and stay in this hegemonic power place, one of which is the US dollar. And the others are to control the flow of the energy resources or limit the flow of the energy resources, and the others are divide and conquer, turn neighbors against each other, sell weapons, and make profits. So there are different shapes for the United States to keep its hegemonic status. Now, Syria is very important for them for multiple reasons. The first reason is Syria geographically, if you see from the times of the Mongols to the Romans, to the Islamic conquerors, everyone, they wanted to conquer Syria, and especially the parts that are on the coast linking Turkey, current Syria, Palestine into Egypt. And these ring countries, if you have an access for it, then you have an access to Europe, you have an access to Anatolia, you have an access to the Middle East, you have an access to North Africa, and even from North Africa to the Saharan countries, right? So it's very important geopolitically speaking for them. And all the emperors in the past were not stupid just to occupy Syria. They knew the importance, geographic importance of Syria. But in 2011, the Americans wanted to conquer Syria indirectly through their proxies like they did in other countries. Because Syria, as I mentioned, its geographical importance, but also because it represents the last Arabic country that stands between Israel and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in Palestine. And how? Because the Syrian Arab Army has an ideological belief that they have to support the Palestinian resistance groups against the Israeli occupation forces, and they have given them weapons, they have given them training, and they have given them military knowledge, and those are very important. And many of the weapons that Syria bought from Russia, by the way, they ended up in the hands of Hezbollah, for example. And Hezbollah then delivered them to Gaza through the tunnels under the ground. And those are the weapons are now used, the Cornet, the Chinese technologies in the Gaza Strip. So Syria represented a challenge for Israel, but not for the United States, because they are not the same. Americans wanted to occupy Syria for Israel, not for this grand strategy of the United States here. Of course, Syria is a challenge because it's a challenge for Israel, but not directly against the United States, because Syria doesn't represent a threat against the United States, and it's very far away from the United States anyways. And the second challenge for the Americans was they wanted to kill the Nord Stream project in Russia, right? And they don't want to bomb it in front of everyone. Everybody will know it. I mean, they did it now, but
we still know they did it.
Yeah. But this was like 15 years ago. They had a plan A, and the plan A is you remove Assad from power, and then you extend the Qatari gas pipelines through Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, and then Turkey distributes this gas into Europe. So when the Qataris and the Turks came to Syria in 2008 and 2009, and they offered this to Assad, Assad said, no, I'm not going to backstab my strategic ally, Russia, and in order to send this gas into Europe, although the economic incentives for Syria was huge. And Assad, if he wanted to make personal profits, he would have become now billionaire, right? If he just allowed these gas pipelines to be, to just flow gas to Europe. So Assad said no. And they went historical, and see that the two countries which invested so much in Syria were Turkey and Qatar, because they have invested interest in this. They wanted this to happen, and it didn't happen. And Assad foiled this operation. And now they took out the Nord Stream pipeline. So when we speak about this, you see the link between Syria and Ukraine. And in Ukraine, because one of the reasons why also Americans wanted to hit Assad, because the Mediterranean is also, Syria gave an access for the Russians to have a fleet on the Mediterranean. And between the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, the Russians always had this struggle, like they want to have a free access of fleet, because we have a sea power and a land power, and in geopolitical theories, and they don't want to lose this sea power. Therefore, in 2014, when the coup happened in Ukraine, the first thing that the new regime in Kiev wanted to do is to kick out the Russian forces from the Black Sea. So the Russians went and they took over the Crimea, because it's very important for the fleet. And similarly in Syria, because it's very important for them to have an access in the Mediterranean and in the Black Sea. So the Russians also had an invested interest to come to Syria and protect their interests there. Those are two reasons that I mentioned, but one also extra reason, the Iranians, Qasem Soleimani, who was assassinated by Trump in Iraq, the former head of Al-Quds Force in the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, he went in 2015 to Russia, and he had a very long meeting with President Putin, like for many hours. And with maps and with the intelligence information that Iran had, the Iranians told the Russian side that if Syria falls, the Americans have a plan to bring this so-called jihadi scene in Syria and move it into Central Asia on the southern belt of Russia. So they're going to have similar jihadi scenes in Tajikistan, in Turkmenistan, in Kazakhstan, in all these countries, so that Russia cannot have an access to Afghanistan, to Pakistan, and also to the Pacific. So this was all geopolitical calculations from the Russian side and from the Iranian side. And the Iranians told the Russians that if you don't intervene now, this was in 2015, this is what's going to happen next. And they showed their intel to the Russians. And the Russians were already part of the conflict, supporting the Syrian army with ammunition and weapon, but directly intervening in this scene was a major decision because it's a big, big adventure for the Russians. They didn't want to go into war, but they had, in my opinion, no choice but to go to war and destroy the ISIS, al-Nusra, and all these terrorist groups in Syria. Because once they came to Syria and they published the satellite images, everybody was shocked that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of oil tankers are used by ISIS. They are stealing and looting the Syrian oil, and they're sending this oil to Turkey, and from Turkey it's been distributed around the world. But ISIS was receiving cash money, dollars, from a NATO country. And they were buying all these Toyota trucks, their guns and their weapons and their ammunition, right? So Russia understood that once Syria falls in the hands of this, if Syria falls in the hands of these terrorists, this terroristic scene or this experience will be copied in other places. And this time it's going to be knocking the door of Russia. So all these reasons together in Ukraine and in Russia, the Russians intervened and it was decisive. The Russians actually changed the equations in Syria.
Wow. Yeah. And if we go back to the 1990s, that's exactly what the US did. You know, they moved all these jihadists to Chechnya and to Dagestan, and they were blowing up the Russian pipelines. And the US, they tried to reinvent the Afghan war in Chechnya. And Russia lost the first Chechnya war, and then they had to bring in Putin to save Russia, and he finally defeated the jihadists in Chechnya, and then he set Russia on the right path.
Yes, actually, this is I was watching an old interview for Professor Mikhail Hudson, and he explains the situation in Afghanistan, and he explains the situation, the jihadi scene nowadays, and he makes a link with the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, and he says, basically, Al-Qaeda is a contract army for the United States. And this is not something like a conspiracy theory. And this is a proven fact. And the proof of it is that in the late 1970s, it's 1979, first time Jimmy Carter, he put his signature on this training and arming the jihadists in Afghanistan, and they sent all sorts of Stinger missiles and training to the Islamists in Afghanistan. But this was also carried out by the Pakistani intelligence and also the Saudi intelligence, right? Now, in 2024, Saudis are not interested in this. They don't want to support this jihadi scene around the world. They have their own economic vision. They want to build their own country and invest in their own country. And now the Chinese came and said, if you want to really stabilize your country, I can also make peace with Iran. So let's deal among each other. And the Chinese succeeded in striking a security and diplomatic deal between the Saudis and the Iranians. And this is good news for the region, which lived endless wars because the Saudis were instrumental in the US divide and conquer strategy. Once they supported Saddam Hussein against Iran, and then they turned against Saddam Hussein to protect Kuwait, and then they supported the American invasion of Iraq. And this was tasked by the United States, tasked. It's not like something like, can you do it for us as a favor? It was tasked by the United States to spread the Wahhabi brand of Islam. Because after the fall of the Soviet Union, they need also a new boogeyman to create a new enemy so that they can invade other countries. And now the boogeyman was the radical Islam, which on the highest level of these radical groups, they're collaborating with the CIA, they're collaborating with the Saudi intelligence, with the Qatari intelligence, etc., etc. But in front of the American people, the Americans can sell these wars and say, look, oh my God, those radical Islamists, they're coming and to bomb us again in the Twin Tower, and we have to go and fight terrorism. That's why they sent troops to Syria to fight terrorism. Right? And now they occupy the oil fields of Syria and the wheat fields of Syria, and they block the trade routes of Syria, and they just trying to divide Syria on different lines. So this is how the American empire operates, and this is very evil. And I don't make these statements like for media consumption, but the way the Americans think to continue in their hegemonic status, it's evil. They do not accept the fact that other countries can rise. That's why they want to strangle, or they want to try to block China's free access to the maritime trade routes to Taiwan. And they have all these military bases in Far East Asia. And they want to divide and slice Europe into half in Ukraine, so that the Russians would not have a trade relationship and technological and energy relationship with Germany. So both sides do not rise, even on the expense of their own allies in Europe. And in the Middle East, you see, it's all these wars are a result of the American policy. Therefore, I truly see that the Russian offensive in Ukraine has emboldened the global South countries, because they found that NATO is not the invincible army that they thought it is, and they could be defeated. And similarly, what's happening in Gaza, people woke up to the fact that Israel is not an invincible army as they try to portray themselves. They could be defeated, and they could suffer huge losses. And this is happening in front of our eyes every day. Israel is killing civilians. That's not a military victory. But you see the footage coming from Gaza, how their soldiers get sniped and their tanks are destroyed. Mostly are military targets, right? And just for a comparison, in 1967, Israel occupied the West Bank, the Golan Heights, Gaza, and the Egyptian Sinai in 6 days. 6 days. It's been 7 months in Gaza, and they cannot defeat Hamas. And for context, guys, Hamas is it's not strong. You think like a very strong military power? No, but they are fighting with a different strategy against the Israeli forces, and the Israelis cannot really fight in the tunnels, in the underground, and the guerrilla warfare and street fights, and there's so many other components. So imagine what would happen if a war erupts with Hezbollah. Hezbollah can face like a man-to-man fight. Israelis have no chance against the Hezbollah. So what did Hezbollah do in this regard? They said, okay, so what's the strength of my enemy? They can destroy my country. So I should have the capacity to destroy his country. Now Hezbollah says, look, we don't have a balance of power between us, but there is a balance of terror. If you destroy my cities, I destroy your cities. I have the capacity. But in your case, if your cities are destroyed, all these dual citizenship holders and second passport holders, who's going to stay? The Lebanese. Even if they want to escape the country, they will not have a chance to escape the country, right? Even if, I'm saying. But somebody who is from Manhattan or from London or from Kiev or from Russia or from all around the world, and they came to Palestine and they have now an Israeli passport and they reestablish new lives on Palestinian territories, they have a second option, which is their first option, which the countries that they came from. And I'm not calling for the destruction of Israel. I'm just saying in a scenario, if something like this happens, then people put yourself in their shoes. If you have an American passport, you will ask your American embassy to evacuate you, right? And the same thing goes for other European countries. And this is something, in my opinion, the Israelis know, and the enemies of Israel know, and they're using this as a weapon against Israel And nowadays, 200,000 Israelis have evacuated northern settlements in Israel because of the Hezbollah attacks, and they have nowhere to go. And so many of them, because the Israeli government cannot even give them enough housings, so many of them have chosen to go back to their own original countries. So Hezbollah changed the equation in the north. And Hamas changed the equation in the south, that all these enclaves around their positions are unsafe for the settlers. Therefore, the Israeli side, because one of the pillars of Israel is deterrence, if you hit me one bullet, I hit 100 bullets against you. But this is not working now, because they're just killing people, as I mentioned, in Gaza, and the public opinion is just turning against them more and more and more. So they lost deterrence with small non-state actors. They lost deterrence now with Iran, with these ballistic missile attacks against them. And they're losing the public opinion. The only thing that the Israeli government stands on is, at the moment, foreign support. American military support, German military support, British military support, intelligence. These powers are the only ones who can keep Israel functioning at the moment. And those are the powers who came in to save Israel when the missile attacks happened from Iran. Many major powers intervened to protect Israel, including Jordan, by the way. Crazy.
Wow. Yeah. So, what do you think is going to happen? Are the people of Gaza, will they be able to go back to their homes that were destroyed over the last 7 months? Or so is this like the final solution from the Israeli point of view? Because if we look back over the last 15 years or so, the Israelis would just bomb Gaza for a few days or a few weeks, maybe a month at the most, and then it would be back to square one.
Mm-hmm.
But now it seems like they want something very definite, and they want a perpetual a final solution, or like an answer. And the Israeli public are also very much in support of this bombing,
Yes.
which is quite shocking.
Yeah.
As the Jewish American Norman Finkelstein, he said that Israel is a satanic state because of all this the murder and the genocide and the slaughter that is happening. At the same time, 90 to 95% of the public support this. So, where do you think we will be, like, say, 7 months from now?
Oh wow, that's a very big question, and I think it all depends on the continuation of the resistance against Israel. Look, in Gaza, if Israel wants to win this war, and what I mean by winning, which means expelling the 2.2 million Palestinians to the Sinai. This is the declared goal. Ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from Gaza to Sinai, and then they want to distribute them to European countries. They take the educated ones from them, and the rest they keep them in tents in the Sinai. And this is a very dangerous scenario, because if there are tent cities in the Sinai, and these people are living in perpetual poor, they will stay in poor, they will stay in uneducated, and there will be lack of food and medication and harsh environmental conditions, etc. I mean, if I was born in that place in the Sinai, or I was 10 years old or 15 years old or even 18 years old, and I'm being kicked out of my land, and I go to the Sinai in poverty and without education and without proper medical care and all these basic necessities, the only option that I would see available for me is to fight back. And then if the Palestinians carry arms, and believe me, there are no lack of weapon suppliers, and if they carry out arms and try to go back to Gaza from Sinai, then Israelis will say there is a security threat coming against Israel from the Sinai, and I want to create a buffer zone in Sinai. And the Israelis occupied once the Sinai in 1967 war till 1975, 1976. So there is a precedent for that. And I think that's what the Israelis are thinking, to create another buffer zone then in the Sinai. And this is the what is called the what do they call, the bigger Israel or the grand Israel?
The greater Israel.
Greater Israel, right? From the Euphrates to the Nile. And this is not like it's open discussion. There are Israeli officials stand in front of a map that shows the greater Israel from the Nile to the Euphrates. And this also raises the question then, who is actually behind the war in Syria? Were they the Americans, or were they the Israelis and the Zionists to kick out Assad from power, to create a puppet government, or to create the terroristic hub in Syria, so that the Americans would have the justification to intervene and occupy the country, right? And see how the Israeli theorists or the Zionist theorists talk about the greater Israel. They say that their borders will be from the Nile to the Euphrates. And they say, and this is according to them, on the eastern side of the eastern shore of the Euphrates, it's going to be Kurdistan, they say. They're going to be our Kurdish friends and Kurdish allies. And who the Americans support at the current moment on the eastern shore of the Euphrates? The Kurdish militias, right? And who occupy the eastern shore of the Euphrates? The Kurdish militias. And they're trying to create a small Kurdistan there. They call it a Rojava. So think about it. What are the Americans doing there? Are they helping Israel to create a greater Israel in the region? Why would they occupy eastern Syria, just this particular place where the Israelis say this is going to be our borders with the Kurds, and then give all the weapons and support to the Kurds and create a 60,000 manpower army in the east? So we have to ask these questions. And I think the Egyptians know this, although they are an American ally, but they know what could happen next if they allow the influx of the Palestinians. One, they could be targeted by Israel in the, let's say, in the future. And two, many of the rural areas in Egypt, they are sympathetic with the Muslim Brotherhood. And Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood. So they will see this as a personal or an ideological thing for them. So this could be very dangerous for Egypt. So I don't think that Israelis will manage to kick out the Palestinians from Gaza. Many Palestinians are leaving Gaza, those who have money, and they're bribing the Egyptian security forces 6,000 per head to come to Egypt, but then they are leaving to Europe. They are receiving refugee status by different European countries. I think after the Iranian attack on Israel, and the huge Israeli domestic turmoil and the people's pressure on Netanyahu to strike a deal to release the hostages, and the increasing pressure on the American administration by the campus demonstrations, for example, and the military pressure is increasing also on Israel from Hezbollah, from Iran. Syria is still playing its role, which is a coordination hub for these groups in Syria. And this is one of the reasons why the Israelis bombed the consulate of Iran in Damascus. I think the Israelis do not have the upper hand to kick the Palestinians out of their land. And I think time is playing against Israel. And I think that after Rafah will be a bloodbath. If the Israelis wage a ground offensive, 1.4 million people stuck in Rafah, they have nowhere to go. I mean, they keep telling us they have an evacuation plan. To where? To where? To the Mediterranean? To the waters? They have nowhere to go. North is Israelis are sniping every walking cat and every walking dog and every walking human being. And to the south and to the east, south, Egypt is blocking the borders. Where to? Somebody tell me, what is this evacuation plan about? So they're going to push them in the waters? What's going to happen? So I think if they go to Rafah, we have two things we are going to witness. One, people will understand everywhere that this there's going to be a huge bloodbath bloodshed in Rafah, like more than the ones that happened in other places, because there is no geography in Gaza now as much as populated as in Rafah, 1.4 million people. And two, they will realize that the groups fighting against them, Hamas, Jihad, etc., they have a plan, and they will inflict pain on the Israeli occupation forces. And you can agree, disagree, call them whatever you want to these Palestinian factions who are fighting there. But if you're a Palestinian and living now in Rafah, and you see that the Israelis are advancing and they want to wage a ground offensive, what are you going to do as a man if somebody gives you a weapon? Are you going to fight with Hamas and Jihad or not? Even if you're a Christian, you're going to fight with them, right? And this is why I say what Israel is doing, they are giving more support, popular support to Hamas and Jihad and other groups in the region. There was no time in the Arabic world since the Second Intifada in 2000, there was no time that the people in the region supported these armed groups against Israel in this level. I don't remember because I lived all these times in the region, but the support for Hamas, Jihad, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen speak. Even the Iranians. I mean, the Saudis and the Qataris try to always portray Iran as some sort of infiltrator in the Arabic world in order to spread Shiism, etc., etc. Now that the war started with Israel, the existential one, the crucial one, the Arabic people, they see that the number of Arabic countries that came in support of Palestine, in exception of Syria, which is half destroyed, by the way, is zero. And most of them are coming from either Iran or the allies of Iran in the region. The rest are supporting Israel. And they wish that this would be over because they want to normalize relations with Israel. And they have different priorities. I mean, some people call them traitors, call them whatever you want. They just have different priorities. And if you go to the Emirates and you speak with 100 Emirati people, they say, why would I care about what's happening in Gaza? I mean, I want to have a good life. I want to have a good car. I want to have this and that. I want to have good jobs. I want for my country to deal with everyone. I don't care. But if you go to Syria, if you go to Lebanon, if you go to Palestine, if you go to Jordan, if you go to Egypt, those are the neighboring countries of Israel, which these people lived wars and saw destruction. People are overwhelmingly with Palestine and with the groups that support Palestine, although major channels like Al Jazeera are trying their best to divide the pro-Palestine community and tell them that Iranian response against Israel is a theater, and Iran is giving now justification for Netanyahu to continue the genocide. They're completely trying to brainwash the people into believing that there is a secret agreement somehow under the table between Iran and Israel, and they are secret allies under the table, and they're both conspiring against the Arabic people. I mean, let's suppose this is correct. I would go with you. Let's suppose Iran is conspiring against the Arabic people with Israel. Then where are the Arabic governments? Why not a single Arab government is actually supporting the Palestinians? Go support the Palestinians and withdraw and take this card and this justification from the hands of the Iranians. If you give a support to the Palestinians, Why would the Palestinians receive support from Iran? You Arabic people, you call this an Arab-Israeli conflict. Then why do you allow Iranians to give support to the Palestinians? You are the Arab, give them support. It's so crazy the way these people speak and the way these people try to portray things. And they want to remove, these people, they want to destroy Syria. They want to remove Assad from power. They want to destroy Hezbollah. They want to destroy Iran. And they want to destroy every ally of Palestine. And then they say they are pro-Palestine. I just don't understand how could these people be pro-Palestine and want to destroy the players, state and non-state actors who actually give support to the Palestinians. Basically, these people are fifth columns. And what they're trying to do is they are taking away all the elements of strength from the hands of the Palestinians. And at the end of the day, if they destroy Syria, if they destroy Yemen, if they destroy Iraq, if they destroy Iran, then the Palestinians have no support left. And the Palestinians will say, look, I cannot resist anymore because nobody is giving me anything to continue the fight. So maybe I have to surrender. And then these people will go into complete silence and they will just forget about the Palestinian case. So there is also what I call these fifth columns in the Arabic countries and among the Arabic people. And why I mention Al Jazeera, because Al Jazeera is the biggest psyop in the Arabic world, in my opinion. They have brainwashed millions and millions and millions of Arabic people into believing this narrative that I just explained to you. The night that Israel was attacked by Iran, I turned on Al Jazeera Arabic, and they have their military expert, and he was saying that this is a tacit agreement between Israel and Iran, and both are allies under the table. And he says that Netanyahu was under huge pressure, international pressure, because of the massacres he was committing. And then once Iran attacked Israel, now all the lights are on Netanyahu as a victim, instead of him being the genocider or the committer of these crimes. So they try to say that Iran is actually helping Israel continue the massacres. This is on Al Jazeera. Wow. And people who understand Arabic, they would know what I mean and how Al Jazeera is playing this role.
Oh, that's quite unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And it's also very disappointing because as we talked about the greater the Israel, that's the plan, you know. So, well, if you let the Zionists take over Gaza, and then they're going to somehow go after West Bank, and then they're going to come after all the Arab countries in the neighborhood. Yes. So they want the regional, the hegemony, and they want to take over and do regime changes everywhere and place in puppets. So, well, if these people had any sort of geopolitical sense, they would know that the best security for them is the two-state solution that's going to limit the expansion of Israel.
Look, the two-state solution, in my opinion, was one of the solutions before October 7 events and before these massacres in the Gaza Strip. At the moment, two-state solution is dead. There is no two-state solution. Let's not pretend there is a two-state solution anymore, because the Israelis, they said, there is no two-state solution. I'm not going to accept it. And they will occupy every inch of Palestinian territory. They say, from the river to the sea, there will only be an Israeli flag, an Israeli sovereignty. And this is also in the charter of the Likud party. And it's been from the 80s. Now, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's completely different narrative, by the way. So they try to portray it as genocide against the Jewish people. That's completely false, because the Jewish people were in Palestine before the existence of the state of Israel. And when the Jewish people were persecuted from Europe, they escaped to North Africa and to the Middle East to find safe haven and shelter in Arabic countries, and nobody slaughtered them for being a Jew. Jewish people are welcomed. Jewish people are integral part of the Middle East. Jewish people are part of Syria, Lebanon, are part of Palestine. Of course, from the river to the sea, when they say Palestine will be free, Jewish people must live in free with the rest. But what I'm trying to draw the distinction here, these radical Zionists who believe in ethnic cleansing of the rest so that they only have an ethno-religious state in the entire Palestine, they're not welcomed. If you are born in, I don't know, in the United States or in Ukraine or in Poland or in Germany, and you think you are entitled more into territory and the land and the house in Palestine, more than the Palestinian whose grandfather and grandmother was kicked out from Palestine only 60, 70 years ago, or even less after the 1967 war, you're delusional. You are delusional. If you think that you can just come and have a piece of land on the farm of other people, you're delusional. And if you think that the Palestinians will accept that, you're again delusional. And unfortunately speaking now, because Israel says that it represents every Jew around the world and it is a Jewish state, so it is committing crimes in Gaza in the name of the Jewish people. And this is very, very dangerous. And this is, in my opinion, increases anti-Semitism also. Of course, they're anti-Semites, regardless. They're people who just hate the Jewish people because they're Jewish people. But this is also increasing the negative sentiments against the Jewish people because Israeli government says that it represents the Jewish people and it is doing in the name of the Jewish people. And then you have these radical Zionists in Israel, you mentioned 90%. This is a huge percentage of people support what's happening there. So I'm not I'm very realistic, you know, and if Israel crumbles, and that is not a scenario that I'm preaching, that's a realistic scenario because, as I mentioned, Israel is based on deterrence, which is its military power. Now it lost it, and it doesn't have anything to deter its enemies except for nuclear weapons. So if Iran goes nuclear, it's a tit for tat. It's done for Israel, right? It's lost its deterrence in Israel. It's lost its capacity to provide a safe haven and shelter for every Jew around the world, because Israel is no more a safe haven for the Jewish people. Jewish people are safer in Syria and in Lebanon at the current moment than in Israel. And the third is the foreign support. So if the United States receives, and it is going to happen in Ukraine, a major humiliating defeat, strategic defeat, this is going to reflect badly on Israel. The United States will have to recalculate its priorities. And there is no empire that can stay for 100, 200, 300, 400 years in the peak of power. There is none. History is just in front of us. It's an open book for us to learn. But for the American empire, and I said this in a previous podcast, the Americans couldn't use the opportunity to exploit this status of being a hegemon and continue to stay hegemon for a longer time. They didn't use their expansion around the world to bring benefit to their own people. They just benefited themselves. The people who are going to these wars, the military industrial complex, the bankers, and the people who have this invested interest in these wars. But the people didn't bear the fruits of these wars around the world. Therefore, since the fall of the Soviet Union, which is now we have 20, 30 years for 25 years of the United States being on the peak of its empire strength. And already the United States is a shrinking power now. And already the United States is printing money. And this is, by the way, I think it's the fourth stage of any circle of an empire, and 2 stages more left. You know, they are already on a shrinking mode. And the only thing that they have in their hands is printing money, but they cannot print money forever. When the Chinese strike, they link their currency to gold, which is, you see why the Chinese are buying tons of gold every day. You understand what is expected in the future. And the Americans are terrified That's why they sent this aid to Taiwan. This is desperate. What can $8 billion do for the Taiwanese? I think 8 or 12 billion. Nothing. What can 60 billion, 80 billion do in Ukraine now? Nothing. It's desperate. And it's best for the United States to, to be part of the international community as a normal, sane nation with China, with Russia, with Brazil, with South Africa, with India, with the rest of the world, and for mutual benefit of everyone. But they cannot do that. They accuse their enemies of being ideologues. They are the biggest ideologues in the world. And they are so arrogant. And I despise their style. I meet with mainstream American journalists. They send me, by the way, emails to my business account. They hate me with passion, but secretly they send me emails. Oh, I'm visiting Berlin. Maybe we drink a coffee together. And I say, okay, but this is out of, you cannot record it. You cannot publish it. We can just chat. And when I meet these people, and many of them come and visit Berlin and they want to meet me, because they want to know why I have this position. And they say, oh, why do you support Assad? And I say, who said I support Assad? If Syria had a president whose name was George, whose name was Ali, whose name was Muhammad, whose name was whatever, I would have asked him to carry out his constitutional duties and protect my country. And that's what I expect from Assad. I don't support him. I expect from him to defend me and defend his people. And this is what he did. That's why I like what he did. If he left Syria in 2011 and he just accepted the deals, the Qataris told him, we're going to spend tens of billions of dollars to remove you from power. Take some of these billions and go and live in Russia, go and live in Iran, go and live in China, in peace, in Algeria, wherever you want. He refused the deals. So they meet with me. And unlike other people, there are so many people, for example, from Syria, they have this, what do we call superiority or inferior complexity? Something, it's like you think that they are always better than you. And you want to please them. You want to appease them. You want to show them that you are like them. No. When they meet me, I'm not diplomatic with them. If you lied about Syria, I will tell you you're a liar. And your lies have caused lives in Syria. And they come and they want to lie to me with a straight face. And they're like, oh, do you really think that Assad didn't use chemical weapons? No, I don't think Assad used chemical weapons in Syria.
We all know that he did not.
Yeah. Why do you think that, why do you treat me like I'm a stupid person? You know that Assad didn't use chemical weapons in Syria and the evidence is there. But you are reporting otherwise because it is your job to keep the narrative. But when we are meeting in private, why are you treating me like I'm a stupid person? Why are you treating me like I'm like, oh, but they treat you like, oh, but Kevork, don't be a conspiracy theorist. Of course he used chemical weapons, Don't treat me like that. I know more about these cases than you do. And that's why they hate my guts. And many of them, they write shit about me after they see me. They are mainstream journalists, which I educated them on the map of control over Syria. I educated them face to face when I used to live in Beirut, and they spoke shit about me after that. That I'm dumb and I'm a conspiracy theorist when I was educating them about what's happening in Syria. But back then I had a different approach. I didn't know there are two colors. I didn't have experience with mainstream media. This is 10 years ago. I thought that they're just people with goodwill. They don't have a goodwill. If you work as a war correspondent or a journalist in war zones and you work for a major mainstream media outlet, rest assured, you either under full control and you just want to keep your job, so you just do whatever they want you to do, or you're a bad person. There is no in between. You either want to keep your job and so just write whatever they want, or you have a person with bad intentions. And I don't differentiate between them. They are really doing a bad service to humanity.
Yeah. I mean, these people They don't know journalism. They don't have the integrity. They don't even have the knowledge. So, like, if you ask one of this guy, what do you know about Syria? Like, can you name 5 cities in Syria? Okay, they won't be able to name five
No,
cities.
no.
And if you ask, but do you know the history? Do you know the economy? Do you know the various different types of people? So how fast did the GDP grow under President Assad from 2000 to say 2011?
Yeah, they
In
don't know.
2010, the New York Times they listed the top 10 places to visit in the world,
Yeah,
and one of them was Damascus.
yeah.
Yeah.
Syria had 7 million tourists in 2010, 1 year before the war. 7 million. Syria's population was 22 million. Out of 22, 7 million, there were 7 million tourists in Syria in 2010. The GDP was increasing exponentially in 2010. $1 was 50 Syrian lira. It was 48 Syrian lira. Now $1 is 15,000 Syrian lira. Any person with half a brain in 2010, my colleagues, my friends, those who were graduated freshly and they're working in different sectors, in companies, factories, in pharmaceutical industry, in banks, half a brain, you make $1,000 if you are half educated, right? $1,000 in Syria, it was a big money because Syria is a cheap country. And it's not like in the United States, those who are watching from other countries. $1,000 is a huge money. My father, I remember, he used to make between $1,000 to $2,000 depending on the month, right? And my father was considered below middle class businessman in Syria. And for between $1,000 to $2,000 per month, I was just a spoiled boy and used to get my pocket money from my father. And then I have my father's car, which I used to drift every day and just waste the fuel. My brother is the same. We both studied in universities, which my father paid, and my mother's shopping and everything. And then we have food. And every year we had 2 weeks of vacation for 1,000 to 2,000 maximum, I'm saying, of an income. So you do the math. It was very good life in Syria. And I don't think that any Syrian, except those who hate the country with their guts and they just want everything to be destroyed, there is no Syrian who would argue otherwise. Any Syrian who lived in Syria before that, like myself, it was a peaceful country. It was a beautiful country. It was a real multicultural country, Muslims with Christians, with Jews, with different school of thoughts. Nobody has, like, I studied in a university. My neighbors were in the dormitory. I don't even know what's their religion. I mean, if his name is Muhammad or Hassan, you would guess that he is a Muslim, but nobody knows who is what and who is who and why do you believe in Jesus or why do you believe in Muhammad? Nobody cares. Everybody was just coexisting because there was also government embracing these ideals, but they wanted to hit that. They wanted to break that, and they wanted to destroy the mosaic of Syria and then also expel the Christian communities from Syria. And Syria lost most of its Christian community because of this war. And then who came to support the Christian communities in Syria? The groups that, and also Hezbollah. The Americans call Hezbollah a terrorist group, right? Whereas they were supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria, Hezbollah came and they fought against Al-Qaeda in Syria. They don't mention these things on American press. I wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen photos of the Hezbollah protecting the churches, protecting the statues in a church, very respectful. And then you see the NATO supported the ISIS jihadists. They would go and would destroy the churches.
Yeah.
And they would go into the city. What is it called? Malala.
Malula, yeah.
Malula, and they would kill the priests and the
Yeah.
nuns. And then President Assad saved that city.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the only place in the world where they speak the same language as Jesus Christ did,
Yes. Yes. That's true.
Aramaic.
I've been there many times, and the people who speak Aramaic pray in Aramaic. It's a wonderful town. You feel like there is a touch from heaven if you go there. It's really, really beautiful. It's very peaceful. And the people were not carrying arms there, as I mentioned. Like they just invaded it because it's a Christian town, and they wanted to slaughter the Christians, and they destroyed their churches and their monuments. And they invaded Palmyra. I mean, those are not military targets. And they just did it because they wanted to destroy the civilization of Syria. And this is something related to who gave the orders for them to invade these places. I mean, it's quite obvious. It's quite obvious because they wanted to destroy the civilization of Syria. They wanted to destroy the Christian community in Syria. And look at the European and the American countries now. What is their identity? The elites are promoting for sub-identities, like your identity is your gender, your identity is of course there are 60, 70 genders now. Your identity is your sexuality, right? And you have to be proud of it. And so they have also this ideological driven policy, which they want to destroy national identities. They want to destroy religious identities. They want to destroy anything that is related to spirituality with God and etc. This is something that is serious. They did this now in Syria with the destruction of the religious sites, with the destruction of the minds. And they, like in Chechnya, everyone is if you're born in an environment and you keep receiving a certain input, you could be radicalized. People are, they're like they're like a blank book, and you can inject anything in their brains. And they wanted to radicalize the Muslim communities in Syria and to destroy this coexistence with the other religions and groups. And they partially managed to do that. They were people who
so by the way, they've been doing that in the Middle East since the 1950s or so.
Yes.
When the Muslim Brotherhood, they went to the White House to meet with President Eisenhower, 100%. And then they made a deal. I mean, and also the CIA was founded in 1947 or 48. And the first, the coup that they did was in Syria.
Syria. That's very true.
1949.
So the Muslim Brotherhood that you mentioned, they are the Trojan horse of the US and the MI6 in the region. And these Muslim Brotherhood groups, they're the ones who, they were the warhead of this war in Syria in 2011. And previously, they also tried to coup Assad in the late 70s and the early 80s. And they tried to do the same thing with Jamal Abdel Nasser, right? So, and Qatar is a Muslim Brotherhood country. Al Jazeera is a Muslim Brotherhood TV channel. And Qatar, according to Joe Biden's recent designation in 2022, Qatar is considered, according to the US administration, is a major non-NATO ally of the United States. So you do the math. So do you really think that Al Jazeera, which is based in Doha and is funded by the Qatari royal family, is actually supporting the Palestinian cause? Or they're trying to cause divisions among the Arabic people? They are the Trojan horse. And I would assure you, what they did to Syria, Al Jazeera holds a very, very big responsibility for turning the people against each other, giving fatwas to kill civilians if you support Assad. These were all translated to English, thankfully, for the people to see. So,
yeah, I mean, I watched this one really, really horrible video. So like this was during, I don't know, 2016 or 2017. So this group, they, they're just talking to this guy, civilian, and they ask him, "So are you a Sunni or a Shiite?" And he says, "Shiite." And then 1 second later, they just shoot him to death.
Shoot him, yeah.
And this was like so horrible because, like you said, this was not the Syria that was there. Like where people did not care what your religion was, and you have Sunnis, Shiites, Jews, Christians, Alawites, and all these people, they got together, and so religion was not a big deal.
No,
and it was
but
just.
They know how to turn. But they know how to turn the people against each other. You know how they can do it? It's easy. Revenge. So in order for them to create a situation that these people go and kill Shiites, right? Like this. You just stop someone. Oh, you're Sunni or Shia? Oh, you're Shia? Okay. They just fire him like 100 bullets in his body. Because Al Jazeera, they keep repeating fake news on their TV channel, and they host people on a phone call, and they say that this guy's name is Abu Muhammad. You don't know his name. You don't know if he's a real person and he's living in Syria. And this guy is hysterically talking and telling that the Assad forces have invaded his town and they are committing sectarian massacres against the people, etc., etc. And this was happening hundreds of times on Al Jazeera. And there is a Al Jazeera insider who later deserted and left Al Jazeera. He told to the world that actually some of these people were in the studios of Al Jazeera and they were pretending to be in Dar'a, they were pretending to be in Aleppo, they were pretending to be in Damascus, and they're peddling fake news that the Assad government sent its forces to kill the civilians in this town. And there are hundreds of, and then they say Assad forces are raping women and this and that. So they create this anger, right? And and also for them to revenge. And they say because Assad is from an Alawite family, so his forces are all Alawites. This is what they say. Although the vast majority of the Syrian army are from the Sunnis. Sunnis. And these are lies all peddled by Al Jazeera. They had the head of this, what is called the Muslim scholars in Qatar, called Sheikh Al-Qaradawi. Sheikh Al-Qaradawi was a notorious Muslim Brotherhood imam, and he just recently died. I hope he's burning in hell. And he gave a fatwa on Al Jazeera, and he said that any rebel, he said, I give him the permission to kill any Syrian, civilian or soldier, if he is with Assad. He said, I repeat, wow. Even if he's civilian, I give you the permission to kill. And this is a fatwa of killing innocent people in Syria. And who can quantify now how many people died because of this fatwa? And this same imam, his name is the Imam of NATO among the Arabic people, because he gave the legitimacy on Al Jazeera for the NATO intervention in Libya and to kill Gaddafi. All this happened in Qatar. So nobody can come today and fool me and say that Al Jazeera is pro-Palestine. They are not. They are using the pro-Palestine community and using Palestine as a case to gain legitimacy. But at the same time, so when you gain the trust of the people, and then you try to hit all the elements of the strength of the Palestinian resistance, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Hezbollah, and the rest, then you are giving a service to Israel. This is the job of Al Jazeera, and I hope many people would wake up. Al Jazeera called me after the October 7 events 2 times, and before that 2 times as well, and they want me a guest on their channel. I reject. I would never go and participate on Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera made a documentary in 2020, and it's called Assad's Assassins in Europe. And they just make the allegations that the people from the Assad regime who ordered the torture and the killing of the civilians in Syria, they escaped to Europe and they are hunting them. And in this documentary, they speak about me for 5 minutes. So just giving you an example, what they say, they bring people, they blur their faces, they change their voices, they alter them electronically. You don't know who are these people, and they say that they know me, and they know that I'm an asset for Assad in Germany, and that Assad sent me to Europe, and that Assad has a middleman who comes to Germany and gives me instructions to implement his strategy in Germany. This is how far can Al Jazeera go.
Wow. Okay. I mean, and then they would tell you, don't believe in the conspiracy theories. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, imagine that.
So we probably have like another 5 minutes left.
No,
So looking forward, where do you think Syria's future is? Will they be able to join, say, for example, China's Belt and Road Initiative? And as you talked about, Syria has a very, very strategic location, and it's been very crucial for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Because even if we like go back to the ancient Silk Road, the products from China would come all the way up to Syria, and then from Syria it would go to the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, and so on.
100%.
So, yeah. So, well, is there a good possibility for Syria to get stabilized and become prosperous again?
You remember what was your first question? Your first question was if there any link between Syria and Ukraine. And the Syrian case is now has been put on a shelf, and it's waiting for the Ukraine war. So the Syrians know before the Russian offensive on Ukraine, 2 days before the Russian offensive on Ukraine, where was Shoigu? He was in Damascus. And in Damascus, they told the Syrians that they have to hold their positions now, and they have to wait. And the Syrians, they don't have the capacity to go to war against the United States in Syria. The Russians told the Syrians that there has to be a military victory in Ukraine, and the United States has to receive a major strategic blow in Ukraine. And when that happens, the Americans will be forced to re-diversify their priorities and see where are their priorities. And the priorities will not be in Syria. The priorities will be in Israel for sure, but also in Eastern Europe, Far East Asia, and in Palestine, not in Syria particularly. So the Americans will withdraw from Syria, and it's just a matter of time. But they have to receive that slap in the face. And I'm not saying this as like a street language. No, they will. They are already receiving that in Ukraine. So after this strategic defeat in Ukraine, the Americans will have to withdraw from Syria, and they have to withdraw from Iraq. And they're speaking with the Iraqi government. They cannot stay in Syria without Iraq. Their reinforcement is coming from Iraq. They will be just in as an island. So Americans don't have a future in Syria. It's best for the Kurdish people and the Kurdish militias to negotiate with Damascus for middle solution for them. No partition, no federalism, but probably more autonomy for them, cultural rights or education rights. I don't know what type of rights could be given to them. So this is what's going to happen next. Syrians have to sit and wait, unfortunately, because they are living in a very dire situation economically, waiting for this Ukraine conflict to be resolved. And after that, the Russians will come and speak with the Turks in Syria. But this all depends on the balance of power. So if the balance of power is in favor of Russia, then the Russians will be able to provide a better deal for the Syrians, because the Turks are occupying northern Syria. You have Idlib, you have the Americans. So Syrians are like finger crossing in in Damascus and waiting what's going to happen in Ukraine, but most importantly also in Palestine. I think all the indications are there that the US empire power is shrinking. So Syrians have adopted this strategic patience, just like the Iranians. and they have to wait for their turn to come and the right opportunity to rise. Other than that, unfortunately, they have to wait, and this is only going to happen on the expense of the people who are living in misery, living under sanctions, living just suffering to just secure one piece of bread per day. Very, very unfortunate. But they have no other solution but to wait now.
Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah. I know that's not the most optimistic answer, but that's the realistic answer that I can give you.
Yeah. And it's a sacrifice of a generation, because like you said, the American empire cannot last forever.
No.
They're just financially broke. They don't have the diplomatic, the influence, the soft power is just totally gone, or is going away very fast.
Yes.
And if you look at the technology, which is very key for like an empire, if you're falling behind in technology, there's no way you can maintain an empire.
Yes.
And like there were stories, like the best drone company from the US, they sent thousands of drones to Ukraine. And then after 1 year, they found that those drones are not effective in the war, and they couldn't manage the Russian, the interference, and they did not fly as far as the marketing said it would, and the drones couldn't but come back. So like sometimes they would drop the bomb, and then the drones would just lose their way. So what did the Ukrainian army do? They bought the DJI drones from China. So they cannot manufacture ammunition. And somebody like the Financial Times, they spoke with the CEO of Raytheon.
Yeah.
And so Raytheon is like one of the biggest, the military, industrial complex. They make the missiles, and he said we depend on thousands of suppliers from China. So, what kind of like an empire depends on its biggest rival to make all the weapons? Yes. So, and then if you look at the US, the media, the politicians, they're all so dumb, like either they lie a lot or they just don't know. But either way, it's like a society that is broken. They are physically broken. They're all fat, eating bad food, and getting sick. They are mentally broken, spiritually broken. They lost, but God and with Jesus a long time ago, and it's very hedonistic, and so it doesn't have a bright future. So, like maybe with 10 years max, I would say.
Yeah. Also, you mentioned this military equipment. Also, the other type of technologies. They are fear-mongering now against Chinese cars, electronic cars here in Germany day and night. They criticize Hungary for giving Chinese companies the opportunity to invest and sell their PYD cars in, and they're saying, "Oh, we give you our Mercedes, our BMW." Excuse me, it's like there is 10,000 euro difference between your car and the Chinese car.
Yeah, and so I've seen like some videos of the interior of the Chinese electric cars, and
amazing.
They are just like so high tech. The way they park, the way they do self-driving, and all the little gadgets. Some cars have like a mini refrigerator in the car,
Yeah.
so you can
Guys,
put
if
your
there is any
drink.
Chinese, if there is any Chinese listening to this podcast or Chinese from these car manufacturers, please, 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 I need a fuel car. I cannot drive an electronic car. Make one version for people like us who love fuel and love to drive fast cars, or tracks like really chunky cars, like electronic cars are not for me. Like, I truly love you and I love your cars, but I need some fuel cars.
So they still have both, like last year, China made 30 million cars.
Wow.
And so out of that, about 10 million were the electric cars. So they're still making about
Nice.
20 million regular cars. So I think you're safe.
Yeah, good. That's very good to hear. My first car will be Chinese, just for you guys to know.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevork, so much for your time. And thank you for your wisdom. It's very hard to, to find the right people to talk about the reality, because you read the mainstream media, watch the mainstream TV. Oh my God. Like they just would destroy your brain cells.
Yeah. No, if you turn on the mainstream media, you feel like you've felt insulted. You feel like they are fooling you. You feel it. So I am thankful that you give me the opportunity. I do live streaming every day, and despite that, you see, we have so much to speak because I have so much to tell to the people based on a very humble experience in Syria, in Lebanon, and now in Europe. And my approach is, if you can't tell the entire truth, don't lie to the people. That's the motto. Don't lie to the people. And lies have repercussions, and on their livelihood, on their safety, on their health, on them so many other things, on their financial stability. So, and the people are smart enough to see that people like yourself and Scott and myself and so many others, I don't want to mention all the names, but there's so many others doing great job. And why are they gaining so many following? And why are these mainstream journalists are left behind nowadays? Because the people can see and the people can feel the truth. The truth has a power. It has an energy. Like when you're a human being listening to you and then listening to talking head on TV, you will feel the difference of one is genuine and the other one is just reading a teleprompter. You will feel it right away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so where can people find you?
People can find my YouTube channel. I have on YouTube and on Rumble, both Syriana Analysis. I wanted to call it Syrian Analysis, but then I make it like a Syriana Analysis. It's like on a one tone. So it's called Syriana Analysis. You can find me posting my streams there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevork. And
thank you so much.
We will add his information on the video we post. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye now.